sometimes the games, they last a long time because sometimes the people have to think about their move.
The play has... Yes! I told you the players are getting ill. There are no players anymore.
I feel fine, and I'm wearing Williams.
You are one person. You can't possibly play every single move.
Oh, yes. Say that.
Stay back home to us. We'll be Salt Lake someday or bust. Mohawk and Terry boy. There's a pretty little girl.
You ill-begotten sons of perdition! Have you no respect for the priesthood?
We have the right of way here.
Running up. Now,
After you.
after you, sir, I don't want to be run down.
Your royal gentlemen.
Better get this side.
Have a good evening.
I'll try. Can you imagine that? Gentiles running the fire.
This is the last one, I promise.
How many heads squash did you want?
Time to load the wagon. We must journey on to Ephraim.
We would also like to acknowledge those who put forward such an enormous effort to make this lovely evening possible. Steve Buncher and Paul Williams were the co-chairs of the committee for this evening. They, along with Carol Nixon, our foundation director, and Sharon Camp, and their committee and the staff of the park, we thank them for this wonderful evening. It's a somewhat magical night for all of us. Thank you, those of you who are on that committee. I also failed to recognize two other state officials who were here with us this evening. I didn't see them earlier. State Senator Terry Spencer and State Senator Michael Wattops and their spouses are here tonight, and we thank them and we acknowledge them. We'd like to also pay tribute tonight to the sponsor. Hello. They told me to perform in the round, but it doesn't work that way. The sponsors of this evening, we thank the George S. and Dolores Dorr Eccles Foundation. For the Utah Centennial, the Utah State Centennial Commission determined to have a lasting legacy project. And 35 projects around the state were proposed and considered, and the commission was unanimous in selecting what was then, this is the place, State Park, where we are tonight. Through the efforts of that undertaking, through families, individuals, corporations, and foundations in the state of Utah, approximately $8 million was raised for improvements in the park during the centennial. 2 years ago, State Senator David Buehler, who is also here this evening and is a member of the foundation board, introduced legislation. It was the first time in the history of Utah where a state entity had been transferred to a nonprofit private foundation. The legislation privatized this state park. The legislation passed unanimously in both houses. Since that time, some great accomplishments have occurred. Many of them were begun back during the centennial. Tonight, some of those who made those accomplishments possible are here. Tonight, you visited the Huntsman Hotel and the Huntsman Saloon, a replica of what was in Millard County in the 1800s. That was a gift of John and Karen Huntsman and their family. You also tonight visited the Savage Livery Stable. That's a replica of an early Sevier County stable. That was a gift of the Savage brothers and their families, and they are here tonight. You visited the Pine Valley Chapel. It's an almost identical replica of a chapel built in the late 1860s down in Washington County. And the Hooper Eldridge Bank. Those were both gifts of the Eccles Foundation. I might note that the Hooper Eldridge Bank was the first beginnings of what is now First Security Bank. You visited the Deseret News. That was a gift of the Deseret News Publishing Company and the LDS Church Foundation. Also, many of you may have walked by the Anderson home. It's a brick home, a replica of a home built in Sanpete County. Dan Lofgren, president of the Utah Association of Home Builders, and the members of the Utah Home Builders Association built that home as a gift, and they're here this evening. We might also mention Mark Howell and L.D. Bowerman, who are here tonight. They're LDS State, and those two were the co-chairman of the project, built the barn adjacent to Brigham Young's home. And some of you may have seen as you came in, and if you didn't, you will all see as you leave this evening, the magnificent Journeys in Monument in recognition of the handcart pioneers tonight who have given these structures and this monument. We express a special thank you. These gifts were very, very significant. Maybe most significant of all is that the buildings that you've seen that have been built in the last 5 years, no state funds, no tax dollars have been used in their construction. Additionally, they've been furnished by private funds, and there's an endowment in perpetuity given by the donors of those buildings, which will pay for the operations and maintenance of those facilities. Now we're not done. We have about 30 more buildings to go. And we're going to visit with all of you in the future, so just be ready. Tonight, this dinner, which is the first annual First Harvest, will raise a net number of about $50,000. We thank you. All of those funds will be used to develop programs in the park, mostly for the children of our state, and we thank you. Now, as you've been here tonight and walked through the village, visited parts of the park, you've sensed some of the great spirit here. We've asked Ardith Kapp, co-chair of our board, to talk a little bit about the significance of this great place. Ardith, I think you have to look that way.
Okay. Well, I wanted to draw your attention also to the special arrangements we had for tonight. The wonderful sunset and the full moon. We went all out to make it special for you. And in addition to what you saw in the buildings, we trust that you'll take home with you the memories of the feelings that you had. It's the spirit of the park. It was so encompassing. At the time of the sesquicentennial, I remember Elder Ballard saying, this will one day become the Williamsburg of the West. We have a passion to make that a reality so that we can preserve and keep the heritage that is so precious here. As you think about this first harvest and the seeds that were planted and the harvest that was realized, and we've eaten part of that tonight, but I for just one moment would speak of another harvest. As you look out to the valley and see all those lights glimmering and gleaming in the bright, clear sky, would you think about the seeds that have been planted, the seeds of education and commerce and industry and the arts and the hospitals and, yes, the athletics and all of those things? Those seeds were planted, and we're the beneficiaries. Now, the responsibility that we have, ladies and gentlemen, I think is for us to realize that in a future time, others will stand in this place and reflect on the seeds that we planted. And so for all of you who've helped tonight by planting seeds, which we intend to tend carefully, nurture faithfully, and harvest diligently, we know that this is the place. It's the place for children to come and learn. It's the place for heritage to be preserved and reflected. It is the place. I think of the movie Camelot, when King Arthur said to the young boy, ask every person you see if they've heard the story, and if not, tell it strong and tell it strong and clear if they have not. Tell it strong and clear. This is the place to bring children. This is the place to bring families. This is the place for family gatherings, for wedding receptions, for experiences that tie us to our roots. Now, it's a glorious sight out there, but we also have some black crickets, just like the pioneers did in times past. We mustn't let the glimmer of the lights distract us from the reality of the black crickets. But just as in times past, when people united together in worthy causes, the seagulls came. Tonight, we united together in a worthy cause, and we commit to making it worth the investment and build on it and get rid of the black crickets in our valley. Thank you for your participation.
We now have some visitors who have just come in off the trail. And after we hear from them, we will show, and you will see, the premiere showing of the film, This Is the Place. It was a gift of the descendants of Utah's first governor, Brigham Young.
And so with much determination, I decided to make my preparations for the long trek west. I had a strong desire to follow the counsel of the brethren and be obedient, but also my friends told me that I had a curious combination of fierce independence, which wasn't always going along with the brethren. But my difficulty started soon after I joined our company, who was led by Captain Watt. He told me that I, with a widow with such scarce resources, would be nothing but a burden to the company, and I should wait until another season until I was better prepared. But I replied that I would beat him to the valley, and I would ask no help of him either. We had a lot of trials and tribulations on the trek, but one that stands out in my mind the most is the time when one of my oxen, exhausted from pulling such heavy loads, fell down into the dirt and appeared to be dead. I said a prayer in my heart, and I went into our wagon and retrieved a bottle of consecrated oil. And I asked my brother Joseph Fielding to anoint the fallen animal and administer to him and give him a blessing. He, along with another priesthood brethren, blessed this ox. And to the amazement of all those who watched the administration, he began to stir. He rose slowly, and then without any urging at all, started off as nothing had happened. and we saw this miracle repeat itself 2 other times during our journey. On September 22nd, 1848, we arrived at the crest of Big Mountain, and that's when I caught my first glimpse of the valley. How I wish Hiram could have been with me, by my side, and held my hand, and we could have seen this grand and glorious view together. That night, we camped on the east side of Little Mountain, and I, barely able to sleep, arose early in the morning to gather up the oxen eager to start out. And to my consternation, I discovered that several of our teams had been scattered, and we couldn't locate them. The captain, apparently remembering my remarks at the beginning of the trip, ordered the company to march on, and we were left behind. As was my daily habit, I knelt down and asked our Heavenly Father to please bless us that we could locate the oxen. As we were searching, and all of you who've been up in the mountains and seen the quick thunderstorms that roll through, there was a violent thunderstorm, and it struck with such fury that the oxen panicked that were pulling the wagons of the company ahead of us. And Captain Lott was forced to tell the teamsters to loose the oxen so that they wouldn't stampede. Well, the captain and his company of oxen were scattered and lost about the same time that we found our oxen. So we hitched up our wagons, went up Little Mountain, up to the crest, and about that time we could see the rest of the company. And my brother, Joseph Fielding, said, "Mary, do you think we should wait for the rest of the company?" And I said, "Joseph, I see no need to wait for them. They didn't wait for us." And so we rolled right on by, and we arrived in the valley at 10 o'clock that night. After rejoicing with our families and having a public Thanksgiving for a safe arrival, after my family was in bed, as was my habit again, I knelt down to thank my Heavenly Father for blessing us with the determination and the means to arrive in our new home.
When trying to lasso a wild cow to milk, his foot got tangled in the rope and was dragged down upon our ways. He broke his shoulder, which meant that my mother had to do the heavy pulling. I was 9 years old and I can close my eyes and picture everything that happened. But walking it seemed to go on and on forever. Sometimes I'd become so tired that I'd start to hang on the cart. I'd be pushed away gently. Then I would throw myself to the side of the road and I'd begin to cry. Then when I saw that nobody came to comfort me, and that I was being left behind, I would jump up and make an extra run to catch up. Winter came in October. We had 18 inches of snow, though we did not suffer from hunger due to my mother's careful planning. In Iowa City, my mother sold a quilt and a bedspread for the sum of 24 cents. With this, she bought food. My mother had a way with the Indians. She would trade trinkets for dried meat. Some nights were too stormy to build a fire. On those nights, she would give us a piece of dried meat and a piece of bread. As food became more and more scarce, she would stew a little of this meat and make a delicious gravy over it. I guess the reason why it tasted so good was because we only got a little bit of it at each meal. One very cold night, some men were on guard. My mother stewed some meat broth and thickened it with flour and salt. She gave a half pint to each man. They said it saved their lives. Just before we crossed the mountains and things were so terrible, 3 relief wagons came. The sick and old were allowed to ride, but the rest of us had to walk. Some of us children decided to see if we could keep up with the wagons in hopes of getting a ride. One by one, the others dropped out, till I was the only one left. Finally, one of the drivers said, "Say, sissy, want a ride?" My very best manners, I replied, "Yes, sir." He grabbed me by the hand and clucked at the horse and made me run. Run and run. It seemed for more than a mile. I thought he was the meanest man who ever lived, and a few other things that I can't tell you. Finally, when it seemed like I couldn't take another step, he stopped. He picked me up and wrapped me in a blanket and put me at the bottom of the wagon. I changed my mind about him, knowing now that by making me run, he saved me from freezing to death when he took me into the wagon.
Our rations when we started out was a pint of flour a day, and we had some bacon and some soap. Well, these items soon gave out. We had to take a cold water wash for lack of a vessel to warm the water in, and not having any soap, we were worse off than ever. At the Elkhorn River, my feet were so exceedingly swollen I could no longer wear my shoes. Then, after the swelling went out, my feet were so sore I never had on a pair of shoes after that for the remainder of the journey. After a while, we regained our usual spirits, and we would enjoy ourselves in the evening around camp with singing and other amusements. There was one song in particular which would send shivers creeping up and down my spine. Do they miss me at home? Do they miss me? It would be an assurance most dear to know that somewhere some loved one were thinking, I wish she was here, to picture them sitting by the fireside, thinking of me as I roam. What would be a joy beyond measure to know that they missed me at home. One day, the captain put me to a cart with 6 people's luggage on and only 3 to pull it. A woman, a lad of 16, and myself, then 17. As I was pulling the cart, I began to feel very strange. The first thing my friend Emmy knew, I had fallen beneath the cart. They tried to stop it, but could not, and it went directly over me. I lay at the back of it on the ground. When they reached me, I seemed perfectly dead. Emmy tried to feel for a pulse, but could not find any. There was not a soul around to help. She stood there wondering what to do when Captain Rowley came up to us. I say, what have you there, Emmy? She replied, Oh my, sir, Fanny is quite dead. That frightened him a lot, and he got down off of his horse and examined me. He could find no traces of life whatsoever, and he told Emmy to stay right where he was, and he would go to the company and send back a cart for me. When I came to myself, I was lying in a tent. There was a grave dug 2 feet deep outside, and the sisters were sewing me up to my waist in a blanket, making me ready for burial. I opened my eyes, and I looked at them. The day that we were climbing Bighorn Mountain, I was learning to ride horseback. A pretty sight I looked. An old sunbonnet on my head all torn, an old jacket, my petticoat all in tatters, and my feet dressed in rags. I was riding in advance of the company when I saw a wagon coming towards us. I rode on, and the wagon was passing all right, so I continued, and I saw some well-dressed, fashionable ladies in the wagon. I heard one of them cry out, There goes my sister! The next thing I knew, I was in my beloved sister Sarah's arms.
My name is Daniel W. Jones. Well, the Mexican War led me to the Southwest, but I always felt that I was missing something. And so when I accidentally shot myself while herding sheep on the old Spanish Trail, I was cared for by a Mormon family in Spanish Fork Canyon, Utah Valley. The kindness that they showed to me smote my orphan heart. I joined the church and settled down. So it was quite proper when Brigham Young stood up in the October Conference, 1856, said men were needed to rescue handcart immigrants who were caught in a snowstorm near South Pass. I volunteered. Kindness for kindness, I figured. When we reached that company, the conditions of distress that met my eyes I never saw before. The company was stretched out for 3 or 4 miles, old men pulling carts, sometimes loaded with a sick wife and children, women pulling carts alongside sick husbands, little children, 6, 8 years old, struggling through the snow and mud. And when night came on, the mud would freeze to their clothes and their feet. Well, as we worked to carry those poor souls to Salt Lake, It seemed there was no way to get the weakest immigrants in without taking some of the freight, taking the freight off of 2 of our wagons. Now, I was asked to stay behind with some others and protect the freight, and so did. Well, we were to prepare for 6 months of snow and isolation. Well, we weren't actually well prepared. You see, for supplies, we had a few biscuits and crackers and some a little fruit. We had a small amount of salt and sugar and about 50 head of skin and bones beef ready to drop. Well, I tell you, those were really it was terrible. We consumed after the salt ran out. We ate the beef unsalted. The crackers and fruit ran out. We were down to beef only. It was a terrible time. We ate raw beef and raw hide for a while, and it made us sick. Oh, well, we prayed to the Lord and asked Him to bless the hide, bless our stomachs so they would adapt to the food. We didn't have enough faith to ask Him to bless the rawhide. Well, then as spring come, and and things were getting a little better, Tom Williams, an apostate, arrived with about 50 men bent on relieving us of the supplies we had just spent 6 bitter months at the risk of our lives to protect. Tom demanded, and I replied, we've been through winter and eaten poor beef and rawhide, and we're not about to let you take this. Now, if you think you can take the fort, you just try it. But I don't think you can take me to commence with. And the first man who arranges any violence to me is a dead man. And Tom Williams backed down. The Lord has His ways, and I was obliged to listen.
You sense in that film tremendous debt of gratitude that we each as citizens of Utah owe to those who came to these valleys. I'm always reminded of my own great-great-grandmother, who from the time they left Kirtland until she reached this valley, she buried 5 children and her husband along the trail. 6 weeks after she arrived here, she died, left 4 children orphaned. All of us share that common heritage that we preserve here. Tonight, you have felt that spirit of Utah. Just take a moment to look around this Bowery. This Bowery was built 3 years ago by volunteers. It was a gift of the Jacobson Construction Company. Look at the ceiling. All of these beams were planed by hand by the employees of that company who donated their time and their labor and erected this Bowery. The willows on the roof were picked along the banks of the river up in Weber County by Boy Scouts. This Bowery is much like where the pioneers celebrated their first harvest, the celebration of 1848. But more than that, it speaks of the spirit of volunteerism. That's what this park is all about. Tonight you sensed the character as you walked through Old Deseret Village and you saw several hundred volunteers. Each of those you saw in period costume, men, women, boys, girls, are volunteers who serve year-round in this park, giving of their own time to preserve the heritage of Utah. We thank you for your part. All of you are now charter members of This Is the Place Foundation. We hope that you will each feel to do yet even more as we preserve our unique and wonderful Utah heritage. May I mention just a couple of things, lest I be in trouble with Carol. Each of you ladies should have at your place a little tin bucket. That is our gift of thank you to you this evening. Please take it with you. That bucket contains a sampling of products that are made in the village and are made available for sale there to those who visit. You also have a brown grocery bag. We invite you to go to the farmer's market, which is directly on the east side of the Bowery, and go shopping for some produce. That fresh produce is also our gift of thank you to you. Please shop generously and take it home with you this evening. Now lastly, your cars will be to the south near the Visitor Center. That's down here. As you walk toward the This Is the Place monument, they'll be brought around by the valet parking attendants. Please be patient. There are an awful lot of cars. Drive carefully. We thank you all for what you are doing to preserve the spirit of early Utah here at This Is the Place. Thank you.